The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty main street of Cedar Ridge, casting long shadows between the weathered wooden buildings that lined the frontier town. Samuel Mackenzie wiped the sweat from his weathered brow as he guided his ox-drawn cart loaded with freshly cut pine logs toward Murphy's General Store. The Scottish accent still colored his English after 15 years in the American West, though it had softened like leather left too long in the desert sun. Sam had made this weekly journey from his cabin in the foothills for 3 years now, ever since he'd staked his claim to a patch of forest 20 miles northeast of town. The routine was always the same: deliver lumber to Murphy, collect his payment, buy supplies, and head back to the solitude of the pines. He preferred the company of trees to most men. Trees didn't lie, cheat, or judge a man by his accent or the calluses on his hands. But today felt different. Their tension hung in the air thicker than the dust kicked up by his ox's hooves. As Sam approached the town square, he noticed an unusual crowd gathered near the old oak tree that had stood sentinel over Cedar Ridge since before the first settler arrived. Angry voices carried on the hot wind, punctuated by the occasional shout that made Sam's jaw clench. "String her up! Apache witch deserves what's coming to her. She stole from honest folk. Make an example of her." Sam's blood ran cold. He'd heard talk in Murphy's store about increased tensions between the townspeople and the Apache who lived on the nearby reservation. Captain Morrison at Fort Apache had been trying to maintain peace, but incidents had been escalating. Too many men in Cedar Ridge had lost family to Apache raids in years past, and forgiveness came harder than water in a drought. As he drew closer, Sam could see the center of the commotion. A young Apache woman, no more than 20 by his estimation, sat bound on a horse beneath the oak's spreading branches. Her long black hair hung loose around her shoulders, partially concealing her face, but Sam could see the proud set of her jaw and the defiance burning in her dark eyes. She wore traditional Apache dress, a doeskin blouse decorated with intricate beadwork, and a long skirt that had seen better days. "What's the charge?" Sam called out, bringing his cart to a halt at the edge of the crowd. "Mind your own business, Lumberjack," growled Jake Patterson, a cattle rancher whose face was flushed red with whiskey and anger. "This here's town business." But Tom Murphy, the storekeeper, stepped forward. "Sam's got a right to know, Jake. Girls accused of stealing silver from the Hendersons' place. They found Apache beadwork near where the theft occurred." Sam studied the young woman more carefully. Despite her precarious situation, she held herself with dignity, her back straight and her chin raised. When their eyes met briefly, he saw not the cunning of a thief, but something else entirely, a deep sadness mixed with resignation. "Did anyone see her take anything?" Sam asked, dismounting from his cart. "Don't need to see it," spat Henderson, a thin man with nervous eyes. "Evidence speaks for itself. Besides, what's one less Apache to worry about?" A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, but Sam noticed that not everyone seemed comfortable with the proceedings. Several townspeople stood at the back, their faces troubled. Mrs. Patterson clutched her shawl tighter and whispered urgently to her husband, but Jake brushed her aside. "Hold on there," Sam said, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to working alone and making his own decisions. "You're talking about taking a life based on some beadwork found nearby. That's not evidence, that's assumptions." "Who made you judge and jury, Scotsman?" Henderson sneered. "You don't live in town, don't face what we face every day. Apache been raiding settlements, stealing cattle, killing good Christian folk." Sam stepped closer to the horse where the young woman sat. Up close he could see the intricate craftsmanship of her clothing, the careful attention to detail that spoke of hours of patient work. This wasn't the garb of someone desperate enough to steal. This was the clothing of someone who took pride in her heritage and her skills. "What's your name?" he asked her in English. She looked at him for a long moment before responding. "Ayana," she said, her voice clear and strong despite her circumstances. "Did you steal from these people, Ayana?" "I did not," she replied without hesitation. "I was gathering herbs in the hills for my grandmother's medicine. I have never been to their house." Jake Patterson pushed forward, the rope in his hands. "Enough talk. Apache lies come as easy as breathing. Time for justice." But Sam had heard something in Ayana's voice that convinced him more than any evidence could. The ring of truth spoken by someone who had nothing left to lose but their honor. As the crowd pressed closer and Jake prepared to throw the rope over a branch, Sam made a decision that would change the course of many lives. "I said hold on," Sam's voice boomed across the square with such authority that even Jake paused. "You want to hang someone, you better be damn sure they're guilty. And I'm not convinced." The crowd fell silent, sensing the shift in momentum. Sam Mackenzie stood between the angry mob and the young Apache woman, his broad shoulders squared, and his weathered hands relaxed at his sides, the stance of a man prepared for whatever might come. "Mackenzie, you're making a mistake," warned Sheriff Collins, who had been notably quiet during the proceedings. The lawman was a good man at heart, but Sam could see the political calculations running behind his eyes. In a town where Apache raiders were the boogeyman used to justify every harsh measure, defending one could cost a man everything. "Maybe so," Sam replied, not taking his eyes off Jake Patterson and the rope. "But hanging an innocent woman would be a bigger one." "Innocent?" Henderson's voice cracked with indignation. "The beadwork was found right outside my back door. Apache beadwork doesn't just appear out of thin air." Sam turned to study Henderson more carefully. The man's nervous energy, the way his eyes darted away when pressed for details, the slight tremor in his hands. Sam had seen enough liars in his time to recognize the signs. "Mr. Henderson," Sam said slowly, "exactly where was this beadwork found?" I told you, near the back door." "Near the door? Or by the door? Or under the door?" "Details matter when a life hangs in the balance." Henderson's face flushed. "What difference does it make? It was Apache work and my silver's gone." "The difference," said a new voice from the crowd, "is that I saw Tom Henderson at the saloon 2 nights ago, bragging about a big poker win." All eyes turned to see Martha Williams, the schoolteacher, stepping forward. She was a small woman with graying hair, but her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to controlling a room full of unruly children. "Martha, you don't know what you're talking about," Henderson said quickly. "I know what I heard, Tom Henderson. You were showing off a handful of silver coins, saying you'd finally gotten lucky at cards. Then yesterday you claimed they were stolen? Seems convenient timing to me." A murmur ran through the crowd. Several people were nodding, remembering the same scene at the saloon. Sam felt a grim satisfaction. His instincts about Henderson had been correct. "Even if that's true," Jake Patterson interjected, "doesn't explain the Apache beadwork. Still proves she was there." Sam looked up at Ayanna, who had been following the conversation with keen attention despite her precarious position. "Ayanna, you said you were gathering herbs. What kind of herbs, and where exactly?" "Osha root and willow bark," she replied. "My grandmother suffers from pain in her joints. The best plants grow near the creek behind the White Houses." "The creek runs right behind Henderson's place," Mrs. Patterson said quietly. Her husband shot her a warning look, but she continued, "I've seen Apache gathering plants there before. Never caused any trouble." Sam nodded. "So you were near Henderson's property, but not on it and certainly not in his house. Someone could have dropped beadwork there while you were gathering herbs, or planted it there afterward." The crowd was growing restless now, but the anger was beginning to shift direction. Instead of unanimous rage against Ayanna, doubt was creeping in. Sam could see it in their faces, the realization that they had been moments away from committing an irreversible act based on thin evidence and prejudice. "This is ridiculous," Henderson exploded. "You're going to take the word of an Apache over a Christian man?" "I'm going to take the word of whoever's telling the truth," Sam replied firmly. "And right now, that appears to be her." Sheriff Collins stepped forward, sensing which way the wind was blowing. "Tom, maybe we should investigate this more thoroughly before taking any permanent action." "Investigation's over," Jake Patterson roared, and Sam saw the rope tighten in his grip. "I've heard enough Apache-loving talk for one day." Jake lunged forward with the rope, intent on throwing it over the branch above Ayanna's head, but Sam was ready. His hand shot out and grabbed Jake's wrist in a grip, strengthened by years of wielding an axe. The rope fell to the dust as the two men faced each other. "Jake, you're drunk and angry, and I understand why," Sam said, his voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. "But you're about to murder an innocent woman. Is that really the man you want to be?" For a moment, the entire square held its breath. Jake's face was red with fury and alcohol, but slowly something else crept into his expression. Doubt, perhaps even shame. His wife touched his arm gently, and the fight seemed to go out of him. "Cut her loose, Sheriff," Sam said, not releasing Jake's wrist. "There's not enough evidence here to justify a lynching." Sheriff Collins hesitated for only a moment before drawing his knife and cutting the ropes that bound Ayanna's hands. She rubbed her wrists where the rough hemp had chafed them, but her dignity remained intact. "This isn't over," Henderson muttered, but the threat lacked conviction. Too many people had heard Martha Williams's testimony about his poker winnings. As the crowd began to disperse, grumbling and casting backward glances, Sam helped Ayanna down from the horse. She stood before him, proud despite everything she had endured, and studied his face with those dark, intelligent eyes. "Why?" she asked simply. "Because it was the right thing to do," Sam replied. "And because I could see you were telling the truth." Ayanna nodded slowly. "My people will remember this, Samuel Mackenzie." She turned and walked away with the fluid grace of someone born to move through wilderness, leaving Sam standing alone in the town square as the dust settled around him. He had no idea that her words were more than a simple expression of gratitude. They were a promise that would be fulfilled in ways he could never imagine. Sam Mackenzie woke before sunrise, as was his custom. The thin mountain air carried the scent of pine and the promise of another scorching day, but something felt different about this morning. As he stepped outside his log cabin to begin his daily routine, a sound made him freeze mid-step, the distant rhythm of many horses moving through the forest. He'd been a lumberjack in Apache territory long enough to know the difference between the chaotic noise of wild horses and the purposeful cadence of riders. His hand instinctively moved to the rifle mounted beside his door, but he didn't take it down. Instead, he stood perfectly still, listening as the sound grew closer. The events of the previous day in Cedar Ridge played through his mind. After helping Ayanna, he'd completed his business in town quickly, aware of the hostile glances and whispered conversations that followed him. Tom Henderson had made no secret of his anger, and Jake Patterson had muttered threats into his whiskey glass at the saloon. Sam had expected consequences, but he'd imagined they would come from the townspeople, not from the direction of Apache territory. As the first light of dawn painted the eastern sky pink and gold, Sam saw them, a line of riders emerging from the tree line like ghosts materializing from the morning mist. 1, then 10, then 20, then more than he could quickly count. Apache warriors on horseback, moving with the fluid precision of men born to ride. Sam's mouth went dry. He'd heard stories of Apache war parties, though he'd never seen one himself. These men were armed with a mixture of traditional weapons and rifles, their faces painted for battle, their horses decorated with feathers and beadwork. At their head rode a man who could only be a chief, tall and dignified, with silver threading through his long black hair and scars that spoke of many battles. But as they drew closer, Sam noticed something that puzzled him. The warriors' weapons remained sheathed or carried in non-threatening positions. Their formation was ceremonial rather than aggressive. And riding beside the chief, her dark hair now braided with colorful ribbons and her best dress catching the morning light, was Ayanna. The war party, if that's what it was, came to a halt 50 yards from Sam's cabin. The chief raised his hand, and the perfect silence that followed was more unnerving than any war cry could have been. Sam counted them now, nearly 200 warriors representing what must have been multiple bands coming together for a single purpose. The chief dismounted and walked forward alone, his movements deliberate and ceremonial. When he was close enough for conversation, he stopped and studied Sam with eyes that had seen decades of conflict between his people and the white settlers. "I am Chief Nalnish of the White Mountain Apache," he said in English that was accented but clear. "You are Samuel Mackenzie, the tree cutter." It wasn't a question. Sam nodded, fighting the urge to glance back at his rifle. "I am. My granddaughter tells me you saved her life yesterday." Granddaughter. That explained the massive response. Ayanna wasn't just any young Apache woman. She was the granddaughter of one of the most respected chiefs in the territory. Sam felt a new understanding of just how close Cedar Ridge had come to sparking a war. "I helped prevent an injustice," Sam replied carefully. "Nothing more than any decent man should do." Chief Nalnish studied him for a long moment. "In my experience, there are few decent men among your people when it comes to mine. Yet you risked the anger of your own kind to protect someone you did not know. She was innocent. The evidence against her was thin, planted by a man trying to cover his own gambling debts. You could not have known this when you first spoke for her." Sam considered this. "No, I couldn't, but I could see she was telling the truth." The chief nodded slowly. "Ayanna has good judgment about people. She said there was something different about you, something that made her trust your intentions even when her life hung by a thread." Behind the chief, the assembled warriors remained motionless, but Sam could feel their attention focused on this conversation. Whatever was happening here was significant, far beyond a simple expression of gratitude. "Chief Nalnish," Sam said, "I appreciate you coming to thank me, but it wasn't necessary. I did what I thought was right. No debt exists between us." The old chief's weathered face creased into what might have been a smile. "You misunderstand, Tree Cutter. We have not come to thank you. We have come to honor you." At some unseen signal, the warriors behind the chief began to move, but instead of advancing with weapons drawn, they began to dismount and arrange themselves in a great circle around Sam's cabin. From their saddlebags, they produced items that glinted in the morning sun: silver ornaments, beaded belts, carved wooden objects, and woven blankets that represented hundreds of hours of skilled craftsmanship. "Among my people," Chief Nalnish continued, "when someone shows great courage and honor, especially in defense of our family, they earn our respect. But when someone of another people does this, knowing they will face consequences from their own kind, they earn something more. They earn a place among us." Ayana had dismounted and now approached, carrying a beautifully crafted leather vest decorated with intricate beadwork in patterns that seemed to tell a story in thread and color. "This belonged to my father," she said, holding it out to Sam. "He was a great warrior who died defending our people. My grandfather wishes you to have it, along with the gifts from our warriors. It signifies that you are considered family to the White Mountain Apache." Sam looked from the vest to the circle of warriors, each of whom was placing offerings near his cabin. The magnitude of what was happening began to sink in. This wasn't just gratitude. This was adoption into the tribe, an honor that few white men had ever received. I don't know what to say," Sam admitted. "Say you will accept the honor," Chief Nalnish replied, "and know that as long as you live, you have brothers among the Apache. Our warriors will watch over your land, our hunters will share their game, and our medicine men will heal your wounds. But more than this, you will help us build understanding between our peoples." Sam took the vest from Ayana's hands, feeling the weight of responsibility it represented. As he looked around at the faces surrounding him, faces that could have belonged to enemies but now showed respect and acceptance, he realized that his life had just changed in ways he was only beginning to understand. The ceremony continued for 2 hours as the sun climbed higher into the Arizona sky. Each warrior approached Sam individually, offering a gift and speaking words in Apache that Ayana translated. Some brought practical items: knives with carved handles, rope braided from horsehair, pouches of medicinal herbs. Others offered more symbolic gifts: eagle feathers, stones carved with protective symbols, small totems representing different aspects of Apache spirituality. Sam accepted each gift with growing amazement, not just at the generosity, but at the stories behind them. The knife came from a warrior who had used it to save his brother's life in battle. The rope had been braided by a woman whose husband had been killed by soldiers, yet she chose to honor the white man who had shown kindness to her people. Each gift carried personal significance, making the ceremony far more meaningful than Sam had initially understood. "Your cabin will need to be larger," Chief Nalnish observed wryly as the pile of gifts grew. "Or perhaps you will need to build a second one just for storage." Despite the solemnity of the occasion, Sam found himself chuckling. "I might have to take up trading instead of logging to make use of all this." "That may not be such a bad idea," the chief replied, his expression growing more serious. "Your actions yesterday will have consequences in the White Town. Not all of your people will understand why you protected an Apache woman." Sam had been thinking the same thing. Cedar Ridge wasn't a large community, and news traveled fast. By now, everyone in town would know that he had prevented Ayana's lynching. Some would see it as the right thing to do, but others, particularly those who had lost family to Apache raids, would view it as betrayal. "I knew there would be consequences when I made my choice," Sam said. "A man has to live with himself." Ayana, who had been standing quietly nearby, stepped forward. "My grandfather wishes to speak with you about this. There may be ways to help." Chief Nalnish nodded. "The Apache have survived in this harsh land for centuries, by understanding that sometimes conflict can be avoided through wisdom rather than strength. Perhaps there is a path forward that serves both our peoples." "What did you have in mind?" "Trade," the chief said simply. "You have skills our people need. You understand the white man's tools and ways of building. We have resources the white settlements need: knowledge of the land, medicines, crafts that white women value. Instead of seeing each other as enemies, perhaps we can see each other as partners. Sam considered this. It made sense on several levels. The Apache knew this territory better than any white settler ever would. They understood which plants had medicinal value, where water could be found during dry seasons, and how to read weather patterns that could mean the difference between life and death. Meanwhile, the growing settlements needed lumber, and Sam's operation could be expanded with Apache help. The townspeople might not be ready for that kind of cooperation, Sam said honestly. Then we start small, Ayanna suggested. My people have needs that don't require going into town, tools that break and need repair, metal items that wear out, knowledge of how to preserve food using white man's methods. You could trade directly with us, and gradually the people in town might see that Apache are not the demons they imagine. As Sam thought about this proposal, one of the younger warriors approached and spoke rapidly to Chief Nalnish in Apache. The chief's expression darkened, and he responded in sharp, urgent tones. "What is it?" Sam asked. "Riders approaching from the direction of your town," Ayanna translated. "Many of them, and they appear to be armed." Sam felt his stomach drop. He'd known this might happen, but he'd hoped for more time to figure out how to handle the situation. If the townspeople had come looking for trouble, finding 200 Apache warriors at his cabin would only make things worse. "Chief Nalnish," Sam said urgently, "if they see all your warriors here, they'll assume the worst. They'll think you're planning an attack." The old chief considered this, then began issuing orders in Apache. Immediately, the warriors began moving with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, most of them had melted back into the forest, taking their horses and gifts with them. Only the chief, Ayanna, and a handful of older warriors remained visible. "We will tell them we came to thank you for your kindness," Chief Nalnish said. "Nothing more. But Samuel Mackenzie, you must understand. If they try to harm you for helping my granddaughter, we will not stand by and watch. I appreciate that, but violence won't solve anything. Let me handle this." The sound of approaching horses grew louder, and soon Sam could see dust rising through the trees. Whatever was coming, he would face it, as he had everything else in his life, with honesty and the quiet strength that had carried him through 15 years in the wilderness. As the first riders broke through the tree line, Sam recognized Sheriff Collins in the lead, followed by a group of about 20 townspeople, including Jake Patterson and Tom Henderson. Their faces showed a mixture of anger, fear, and determination that made Sam's heart sink. The confrontation he had been dreading was about to begin, and the fragile bridge of understanding he had just begun to build between two peoples hung in the balance. Sheriff Collins reined in his horse 20 yards from Sam's cabin, his hand resting on his sidearm but not drawing it. Behind him, the other townspeople spread out in a loose line, their weapons visible but not yet raised. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. "Sam," the sheriff called out, his voice carefully neutral, "we need to talk." "Then talk," Sam replied, stepping forward but keeping his hands visible and empty. Behind him, Chief Nalnish and his small group remained motionless, their dignity intact despite the obvious hostility directed toward them. Jake Patterson urged his horse forward, his face flushed with anger, and what Sam suspected was liquid courage from an early morning visit to the saloon. "What the hell is this, Mackenzie? You got Apache warriors at your place now. You planning something against the town?" "I'm planning to have a conversation with my neighbors," Sam said evenly. "Same as I would if any of you came calling." "Neighbors?" Tom Henderson's voice cracked with indignation. "These are the same savages that killed my brother-in-law up near Tucson last year." Chief Nalnish stepped forward, his movements slow and deliberate. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of a man accustomed to being heard. "I am Chief Nalnish of the White Mountain Apache. We came here in peace to honor a man who showed courage and kindness to my granddaughter. We have no quarrel with your town." "Your granddaughter?" Sheriff Collins looked confused. "The girl from yesterday. Ayanna is my granddaughter," the chief confirmed. "And yesterday, this man prevented her murder based on false accusations and planted evidence." Several of the townspeople shifted uncomfortably. Martha Williams had spread word about Henderson's poker winnings, and doubts about the theft had been growing. But Jake Patterson wasn't ready to let go of his anger. "False accusations or not, you shouldn't have interfered, Mackenzie. Apache problems should be handled by Apache solutions." "And what solution is that, Jake?" Sam asked. "Hanging innocent people based on prejudice and planted evidence? That's not justice, that's murder." Easy words from a man who doesn't have to worry about Apache raids, Henderson shot back. You live up here alone. No family to protect, no cattle to lose. What do you care if they steal from honest folk? Sam felt his temper rising but kept it in check. I care about the truth, Tom. And the truth is that you lost your silver gambling and tried to blame it on an innocent woman to cover your shame. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot. Henderson's face went white, then red, but he didn't deny it. Several of the other townspeople were nodding. Clearly, Martha Williams hadn't been the only one to witness Henderson's poker bragging. Sheriff Collins studied the situation carefully. He was a practical man who understood that keeping peace required more than just enforcing the letter of the law. Chief Nalnish, I appreciate you coming to thank Sam personally, but having this many warriors so close to town makes folks nervous. I understand, the chief replied. Most of my men have already returned to our camp. We came in numbers to show the importance we place on honoring good deeds, not to threaten anyone. Honoring good deeds? Jake Patterson spat. What about the bad deeds? What about the raids, the stolen cattle, the murdered settlers? Chief Nalnish's expression grew grave. There have been wrongs on both sides, and I do not deny this. Young warriors sometimes act without wisdom, just as young white men do, but these conflicts serve no one. They only bring more death, more suffering to both our peoples. Ayanna stepped forward, speaking for the first time since the townspeople arrived. My grandfather has been trying to make peace with your leaders for months. He has sent messages to your fort, offered to meet and discuss ways to prevent future conflicts. But no one will listen because it is easier to see us as enemies than as people. Sam saw an opportunity and seized it. What if that changed? What if there was a way for both peoples to benefit instead of just fighting over scraps? What are you getting at, Mackenzie? Sheriff Collins asked. Sam took a deep breath, knowing that his next words would either bridge a gap that had existed for generations or make him a permanent outcast from his own people. Trade, cooperation. The Apache know this land better than we ever will. They know where to find water during droughts, which plants can heal sickness, how to read weather patterns that could save lives. And we have tools, building techniques, access to goods they need. You want us to trade with Apache? Henderson's voice was incredulous. I want us to stop dying over misunderstandings and greed, Sam replied firmly. Chief Nalnish is right. There have been wrongs on both sides, but continuing to fight isn't bringing anyone's dead relatives back. It's only creating more widows and orphans. Martha Williams, who had ridden with the group despite being one of the few women present, spoke up. Sam makes sense. My late husband always said the Apache knew things about surviving in this desert that we white folks were too proud to learn. Mrs. Williams is wise, Chief Nalnish said with a slight bow. There is much both peoples could learn from each other if we chose understanding over fear. Sheriff Collins was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing the political implications of what was being discussed. Finally, he spoke. Chief Nalnish, if your people were serious about peace, would you be willing to meet formally with our town council, discuss some kind of arrangement? The old chief looked surprised. You would consider this? I'm tired of burying good people because of misunderstandings and hot tempers, Collins replied. If there's a way to keep the peace without more bloodshed, I'm willing to listen. Jake Patterson wasn't ready to give up his anger. This is madness. You can't trust Apache promises. And how well have Apache threats been working out for us? Sam asked pointedly. How many more people have to die before we try something different? For the first time, some of the other townspeople began nodding in agreement. The constant state of fear and tension had worn on everyone, and the promise of a different path was appealing to those tired of looking over their shoulders. Chief Nalnish drew himself up to his full height. Sheriff Collins, I accept your invitation to meet with your council, but I have one condition. Samuel Mackenzie must be present as a witness to ensure that both sides speak truthfully. Sam felt the weight of 200 years of conflict settling on his shoulders. By saving one young woman's life, he had somehow become a bridge between two worlds that had known only mistrust and violence. It was a responsibility he had never sought, but one he now realized he could not abandon. I'll be there, he said simply. As the sun reached its zenith over the Arizona desert, casting sharp shadows between the gathered men, something fundamental had shifted. The cycle of violence and revenge that had defined relations between the Apache and the settlers of Cedar Ridge had been interrupted by one man's simple act of decency. Whether that interruption would become a lasting peace remained to be seen, but for the first time in years, Both sides were willing to try talking instead of fighting. The bridge between worlds was fragile, built on nothing more than mutual exhaustion with conflict, and the courage of individuals willing to see their enemies as human beings. But sometimes Sam reflected as he watched the townspeople and Apache warriors eye each other with wary curiosity instead of hatred. That was enough to begin healing wounds that had seemed permanent. 3 months later, the first formal trade agreement between the White Mountain Apache and the town of Cedar Ridge would be signed in Sam Mackenzie's cabin, witnessed by representatives of both peoples and blessed by Chief Nalnish and Sheriff Collins alike. But that is a story for another day. Today it was enough that 200 Apache warriors had come not for war but to honor a lumberjack who had chosen justice over prejudice, and in doing so had shown both peoples a path toward something they had almost forgotten was possible: peace.